Welcome to New Hampshire, where political fortunes come to live free and often die, thanks to those who hold their votes until the last minute. Where the polls and pundits tell us Trump and Sanders will walk away the winners, and where winning here doesn't mean what it used to be. So in a few hours, we'll know if a candidate referring to one of his opponents with a vulgar term, not befitting a possible leader of the free world, will make any difference, or if at the end of the day, voters actually like that kind of language. There is already a thinking that the once anointed, can't-miss, soon-to-be-appointed Queen of the Universe will have to dine on a serving of crow the likes of which she has never experienced. And it might not make any difference in where she will be come November. Everything from the hug to the man who wishes he wasn't married to the candidate. And there's this guy named Jeb. I'm Ed Berliner. This is The Hardline for Tuesday, February 9th, 2016.
We voted for Bernie Sanders. I think that his idea on the government issues that we have and the divide between the upper class, the middle class, and the lower class. I really like the way he's going with dealing with those issues.
I like the kid right there, giving her an idea, right? The polls will soon be closing in New Hampshire, and the damage will have been done. The Republican field will likely shrink. Some egos may shrink along with it. And the political roadshow will head south as the media and voters seek out even more meaningless tidbits to talk about while issues take a backseat to insults and innuendo. Let's see if we can unravel where we are and where we will be when our rolling coverage of the New Hampshire primary kicks into high gear tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 Pacific, right here on Newsmax. Let's get to work. First up, veteran political journalist and associate editor at The Hill, Niall Stanage, joined by the editor from Red Alert Politics, Ron Meyer. All right, gentlemen, good to see you. Let's get to work. Niall, let's start with you. We are told that Donald Trump is going to have an amazing night. He is going to bury the field, and that Bernie Sanders will make Hillary Clinton feel like she's never felt before in a political race. Is that what you're expecting, or something else?
Well, New Hampshire, of course, is always prone to delivering pretty big political surprises. But having said all that, the lead that Donald Trump enjoys on the Republican side in the opinion polling and the lead that Bernie Sanders does in the Democratic side, those are both considerable. It would be a very big upset if either of those people were to lose this evening.
So, Ron, let's just say, and again, we have to look at everything here. This is almost like any sort of an athletic event. Let's look forward and say that maybe there's an upset here. Perhaps Donald Trump doesn't get the big win that he so richly believes he deserves. What would lead to that? What would eat away at that lead?
Well, certainly the exit polls indicate that the lead isn't going to be eaten away from. 2/3 of the Republican electorate said they agreed with this policy towards a temporary ban on Muslim immigrants. And it looks like there's a lot of independents and people who aren't unaffiliated voting in the Republican primary. That should bode well for Donald Trump. But the only way this becomes an upset is if the establishment candidates and Marco Rubio really brought out more people than expected because of the race among themselves. Because really what didn't heat up in the last week that we thought it would was Cruz versus Trump. And that would energize their voters to turn out. But instead, who's been energized? It's the Rubio supporters, it's the Christie supporters, the Jeb supporters, and the Kasich supporters. So the only way that Trump would underperform is if they turned out more people than expected on their end. So, but frankly, I just don't see that happening. The numbers that we're seeing rolling in look like they're looking pretty good. I mean, they're exit polls, so what are exit polls?
Sure.
But if there's any indication, it looks like Trump's going to do fine tonight.
Ron, you use that phrase establishment candidate that we have heard used so often here in the last couple of months. And here I am looking at some notes that say that basically what the people of New Hampshire and the voters are doing right now is they want to stick it to the establishment. It's the outsiders that are winning this year. Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump, the guys who are not the real politicians. Why is it? I mean, because wouldn't you think that establishment candidates are the ones who understand how to work their way around Washington? That's part one. Part two, do you think those people who will go for the non-establishment candidates will still pull the lever for them when it comes to count in November?
You know, New Hampshire wants to pick a winner. And so the exit polls we're seeing saying they want to pick anti-establishment, I think it's bigger that they want to pick a winner. And so that's why I think that the majority of voters, or close to majority of voters, will choose either the establishment or Marco Rubio because they see them as more electable. But I think you make a really good point. And so I mean, Republicans right now are not. We're tired of what's going on in Washington D.C. But if you look at who's running on the Republican side from Washington D.C., they're not really establishment figures. Marco Rubio beat Charlie Crist in a primary where the establishment went totally and wholeheartedly against him. Ted Cruz is obviously anti-establishment, and then you have Donald Trump. It's almost like the governors are more of the Washington establishment, even though they aren't in Washington right now.
Niall, there's that point, and I want you to get in on this as well, because there's still a thinking. I have talked to a lot of people on both sides, left, right, the independents, whatever, and they all ask the same question. Will those people who so want Donald Trump, who so want Bernie Sanders, who so want to stick it to the man, if you will, are they still going to pull that lever in November if they have the choice to do it? Because a lot of people I've spoken to have said, quite frankly, I'll say that I like Donald Trump, but I don't know if I can pull the lever for him if he's actually the candidate.
Well, honestly, I think that they would do so if those people became the nominee. I don't think that the problem for either Trump or Sanders is persuading the people who say they are for them at the moment to vote for them were they to become the nominee in November. The question with both of those candidates is, can they reach out beyond those hardcore supporters to the people who one generally needs in a presidential election? Their argument, of course, to an extent from both of them, is that they would have the capacity to reach beyond their party's normal supporters, or that they, certainly in Sanders' case, he could energize very left-wing Democrats who may not be all that enthused about coming out to vote for someone like Hillary Clinton, who, for better or worse, has been identified with the Democratic establishment for about a quarter century at this stage.
All right, Niall, let's go ahead and move past the lead here. Let's get down to that second place, if you will, specifically the GOP race, of course. In your opinion, we see that Jeb Bush is making some noise here in the last couple of days. Marco Rubio is that the bettors are even saying that he shot himself very badly when he had the robo issue in the debate. But in your opinion, who has done the best job to this point in New Hampshire to capture those voters and come in second?
Well, I think John Kasich appears to have done quite well. Certainly, if one looks at the opinion polls, he's really polling pretty well. Rubio will have to see just what effect that polling, or that debate performance had. But Kasich has done quite well. There is some level of momentum toward Jeb Bush in these closing stages. But again, New Hampshire, very unpredictable. We just don't know how that's going to pan out in the end.
So, Ron, it comes to you then, because we're really talking about the governors here. Chris Christie, Jeb Bush, John Kasich. Who, in your opinion, has done the best job?
Well, unquestionably, among those three, John Kasich. I mean, he's been on the ground doing the grip and grin very, very well, shaking hands, meeting voters. He understands what New Hampshire voters want. But the question for John Kasich is, okay, you beat the rest of the governors tonight. Let's say you even beat Marco Rubio and Ted Cruz tonight. And then what? He's invested nothing in any of these other states. All of a sudden you have a guy who does great in New Hampshire, and then what? I hope that this is the nail in the coffin for Jeb Bush, and I think that it could be the nail in the coffin also.
Wait a minute, let me stop you there, if you will. I'm going to
I
stop you right there, because you said you hope that this is the nail in the coffin for Jeb Bush. Why do you hope that?
Well, I say that as from an editorial perspective for Red Alert. Jeb Bush represents everything that is the party of the past. And Jeb Bush, he's not electable. He polls worse than Donald Trump against Hillary Clinton. And then he embodies nothing new and energetic and fresh. And so he's neither electable nor conservative. And so, certainly he's more conservative than most people, but he's not as conservative as most Republicans would like.
Can you really say that somebody is not electable right now? And I get this when you say that, but can you really say that now when we are only at 2 states, Iowa and New Hampshire? Granted, they're both big states, but can you really call somebody completely unelectable at this point who technically is still in the race?
It is early, and the polls are early, but I mean, if you talk to young Americans or talk to middle Americans, people who are normal, if you go out and knock doors, you say you want to elect another Bush, you'll say, no, I really didn't like No Child Left Behind, what it did to our schools. I don't like that we spent $1 trillion overseas and accomplished very little. I don't like that we went in debt. I don't like that.
Well, that was his brother, though. That was still his brother. Let's be fair.
But listen, the perception is the perception, and voting is about perception. Jeb Bush would literally have to run a campaign both against Hillary Clinton and his brother to win in the general election, and I just don't see that happening. And I think that's why people are looking for someone fresh. That's why they're turning to basically everyone else but a Jeb Bush. He came in as the presumptive frontrunner when he announced, and now look what's happening. He's having to ask his mother and his brother to come out and campaign for him.
Well, let's be fair. Everybody does it. Let's be fair. Everybody
outside.
does that sooner or later. Everybody brings in the families at this point. But no, your point is well
not everybody's
taken.
a member of the royal family.
That's very true too. Ask Hillary Clinton. Niall, let me come to you. I got about a minute 10 left here right now. Jeb Bush, people like that. Isn't it fair to say that a guy like Jeb Bush has got to finish second? I mean, he's really got to. We can talk about money. We can talk about all you want here. But if he doesn't come in second and really make that big push, and if some of the others don't really come up high, it's over. It really is. You're going to run out of money sooner or later.
I think that is basically right. I think that Jeb Bush has to beat Marco Rubio and all of the other people whom we have just mentioned. Now, the surprise package in all of this could, of course, be Ted Cruz. New Hampshire is not a state that is particularly amenable normally to someone of Ted Cruz's ideological cast. But he could do okay if all the establishment people split the vote. If you had a situation where it was Trump, Cruz, Bush, then Bush could possibly survive. But certainly if he were third behind Rubio or behind Kasich or any of those kind of candidates, it's pretty much over. And someone said to me in a story I wrote about this a few days ago, if anyone like Bush does badly in New Hampshire, it's not like they're going to go to South Carolina or to the Deep South and do any better. They have to, this is their peak state.
This is their place. All right, Niall, 5 seconds. You're 1, 2, 3 on the GOP side tonight.
Oh, I'm going to say Trump, Bush, Cruz.
Okay, Ron?
Trump, Kasich, Cruz.
And let the balloting and let the gambling begin, gentlemen. Let's go ahead and pull out the dice because here we go. Niall Stanage, Ron Meyer, I want to thank you both for joining us very much. We'll look forward to talking to you again real soon. And don't forget, real soon, join us tonight, 8 o'clock Eastern Time, 5 o'clock Pacific Time, on the web, wherever you watch us, catch us. The New Hampshire primary coverage begins right here. All the speeches, all the numbers, all the good and all the bad. Stay with us. We're going to go on the ground in New Hampshire next on The Hardline.